You're somebody who's lost like 50 pounds in 90 days. And there's a lot of people that have that exact same goal. If you were to lay out like your 5 golden rules for doing that, what would they be?
Yeah, 5 golden rules for fat loss. Well, the first one would be to control insulin. We know that out of all the hormones inside of the human body, there's over 600 hormones. There's one primary hormone that signals fat storage, and that hormone is insulin. And insulin, Doug, is like the bully at the playground. When he's around, the fat-burning hormones are running away, they're hiding, they cannot coexist. So the simple rule right here is when insulin levels are high, you are creating fat storage. When insulin levels are low, you are then burning body fat. All right, so the goal is to lower insulin. That brings us to the 3 macronutrients that we eat: protein, carbohydrates, and fat. It is by far the carbohydrates that will give you the biggest blood insulin response after you eat it. Of course, processed carbohydrates will get you a bigger response than whole foods carbohydrates, but all carbohydrates will give you a blood insulin response. Fat doesn't barely touch the dial on insulin, and protein has a very small bump in insulin. It's called a phase 2 response. So just knowing that basic biochemistry, we could understand that, okay, in order to lose fat, the first rule here is to lower your carbohydrate intake, especially processed carbs, and increase your protein and fat. That's the first step. You're going to shift your metabolism into a fat-burning state. As you lower your blood sugar levels and lower insulin, you make a metabolic switch to tapping into the stored energy on your body, which is your body fat. So that's the first step. The second step is going to be lean muscle mass. And I know you're a trainer and you're a big fitness guy. You trained here in Miami when you were down here visiting me. Lean muscle mass is also really important for insulin sensitivity. The muscle mass we have acts like a sponge to absorb excess glucose in the bloodstream. And why that's important is because the more muscle mass we have on our bodies, and I'm not saying to become a bodybuilder, but just to build lean muscle mass, the more lean muscle mass we have, the less insulin is going to be required to be produced by the body, by the pancreas. So we could actually get away with a little bit more carbohydrates and utilize that to be filling up our glycogen stores in our muscle mass when we have enough lean muscle mass. So strength training is important for building lean muscle mass. Resistance training is important. It doesn't mean you have to do a CrossFit workout or a 60-minute workout every single day. As a matter of fact, that could actually be too much. But maybe 3 times a week, 3 to 4 times a week, 30-minute strength training session where you are steadily increasing the weight, creating a resistance and building muscle over time. That's the first step here to burning fat. The third step goes aligned with the second step, and that's going to be focus on protein. Protein is a very important macronutrient, arguably the most important macronutrient out there. And when you consume enough protein at your meals, you create muscle protein synthesis to feed the muscles, to grow them from the workout. So animal-based protein would be ideal here versus plant-based protein, but you could still do it with plant-based protein. And the reason I say animal-based protein is better is because it's complete. It's bioavailable. It has all the essential amino acids needed. Plant-based protein is not complete, although you could mix different plant-based proteins to make it complete, but it's just not as bioavailable. And a rule of thumb here for fat loss is to get 1 gram of protein per pound of your ideal body weight. So for the person watching or listening, if they weigh 185 pounds, but their goal weight, their ideal body weight is 35 pounds, then you want to aim to consume 135 grams of protein per day. When you have enough protein, the cool thing about having enough protein, it activates a cascade of hormones and chemicals that help you feel full and satiated. These are hormones that are called cholecystokinin, leptin, peptide YY. These are just signals to your brain, to your stomach, you're full. There's no need to eat the ice cream or go to the pantry and grab the Oreos. Like, you're full, you're satiated, you don't have to snack. You're going to feel really good. And if you get about at least 40 grams of protein at each of your meals at the bare minimum, you signal that muscle protein synthesis. So that would be the third step. The fourth step here is going to be to eliminate snacking and practice some variation of time-restricted feeding, also called intermittent fasting. Let's first talk about the snacking. When you snack, even if it's a healthy snack, you will elicit an insulin response. And I said before, when insulin gets spiked, you're storing fat, not burning it. Now, if you snacked on a shot of like olive oil or coconut oil, that's not going to get you an insulin response, but who's doing that? People are snacking on carbohydrates and they're snacking frequently. My colleague, Dr. Don Klum is his name, he did a patient population survey and he showed with his study that the average American is eating 17 to 23 times per day. And it's the grazing. If they're not sitting down at a meal 17 to 23 times a day, they're snacking and grazing throughout the day. Insulin spike, glucose spike, insulin spike, back and forth, back and forth. They're in this constant fed state, which is signaling fat storage. And this is like you trying to get work done in your office and you're in your flow state, Doug. You got the door locked, and every 2 to 3 hours, your roommate bangs on your door to interrupt you and get you out of the flow state. This is kind of what's happening to your metabolism when you snack. You get your metabolism out of the flow state of burning fat and you interrupt it and it starts storing fat. So with the snacking, we want to eliminate that. I would say the first step here, if you're new to intermittent fasting or time restricted feeding, the first step is to just have 3 meals a day. Have your breakfast, lunch, and dinner. As I mentioned, when you have enough protein and healthy fats, it helps you stay full and satiated, so there's no need to snack in between your meals. Once you've done that for, let's say, 7 days and you feel really good, then you advance to intermittent fasting. Intermittent fasting, there's different ways to do it. I like an 18-6 intermittent fasting schedule as a general rule. And what that essentially means is out of a 24-hour period, for 18 hours, you're in this fasted state. What does that mean? That means you're not eating food. You are having water, coffee, tea, electrolytes, but no food for 18 hours. Then for 6 hours, you have your eating window where you're going to get your protein, your fat. You're going to keep your carbs low. Ideally, you want to have less than 100 grams of carbs total per day in order to get into that fat burning state. But you have a 6 hour feeding window where you have 2 to 3 meals. So what that would look like on your calendar would be, all right, you wake up in the morning and you stay fasted. You have your water, your coffee, your tea. If you want to work out, do it. And you push breakfast. Actually, you skip breakfast. And your first meal is at 12 p.m. You have lunch, maybe a smaller meal around 3 p.m., and then you have an early dinner around 6 p.m., condensing all of your calories in that 6 hour eating window. By doing that, when you are in the fasted state for those 18 hours from 6 p.m. to 12 p.m. the next day, every hour, your body's lowering insulin, burning through your blood sugars, lowering the blood sugar levels, burning through your sugar reserves, which is stored in your liver and muscle cells. And once that's tapped out, you make that switch to burning body fat for energy. And then your body produces ketones if your carbs are low enough. So that is going to be really important. That's the fourth thing. The fifth rule here to follow, the golden rule for fat loss in your 5-step protocol here, is to get quality sleep. You know, sleep is not sexy to talk about, but it is foundational. It's the Swiss Army knife of health. When you upgrade your sleep, every part of your metabolism upgrades. And the opposite is true, Doug. When your sleep is not good, every part of your metabolism downgrades. And it's not necessarily about the quantity or total amount of sleep. It is about the quality of sleep. I'm a big fan of tracking my sleep. I use an Oura ring, but you could use any sleep tracker. And you want to aim, in terms of fat loss, you want to aim to get an hour and a half, that's 90 minutes of deep delta sleep every single night. We go through 3 main stages of sleep: light sleep, REM sleep, which is rapid eye movement, and deep delta sleep. Rapid eye movement sleep is also important. That's where you're consolidating your short-term memory for long-term memory. It helps with productivity, memory, focus. But the deep delta sleep is where you're burning fat. You're activating your fat burning hormones. You're activating a system called the glymphatic system, where your brain literally shrinks in size by 20% to allow this dishwasher-like fluid called the cerebral spinal fluid to go over the brain, flush out accumulated plaques, toxins, and proteins, and cleans the brain out. And that's going to happen during that deep delta sleep. You want to get about 90 minutes. That's going to get you enough fat burning. And you also want to get 90 minutes of the REM sleep. So if you're hitting that, you're going to feel great and you're going to burn fat. If you're not getting enough quality sleep, there's a ton of research showing that following morning, just from one poor night of sleep, you will have higher levels of cortisol, the stress hormone, What follows cortisol is glucose, blood sugar. What follows that is insulin. So you'll have higher levels of insulin, and you'll have higher levels of the hunger hormone ghrelin, making you hungrier, and lower levels of the hormone leptin, making you less satiated and full when you eat. It's a vicious cycle. So that's the 5-step protocol right there. You follow that and you could lose 20, 30, I've seen 40 pounds in 30 days following those 5 rules.
Wow. That's wild, man. There's so much I want to unpack there. I think first, like, what comes to mind is you talked specifically about nutrition and when it comes to like quality and insulin. And then there's obviously a lot of information on the internet and people talking about the importance of calories in, calories out. I know you have a different approach to that. Like, what is your stance on tracking calories for fat loss, and why do you believe it wasn't mentioned in your 5 steps?
Yeah, I do have a different viewpoint on that. 10, 12 years ago, I was a big advocate of counting calories, getting into a calorie deficit. When I owned my CrossFit gym here in Miami, I used to host seminars for the members on the science of fat loss, and I would teach them how to do all of this. And it does work. When you get into a caloric deficit, you're going to lose some weight. But what happens is if you stay there for too long, the metabolism becomes more inefficient and it makes it more difficult to lose the weight. So yeah, calories matter. I don't think they're the most important thing though. I think they're more of a distraction. Hormones trump calories any day of the week. When we could actually focus on hormones and inflammation, which is the focus of that 5-step protocol I just gave you, you don't have to count a single calorie. The human body doesn't have any mechanisms in place to count calories. We're not a bank account. We're not a calculator. We are a very complex chemistry lab. So I would recommend counting macros and getting your carbohydrates under 100 grams of carbs or less per day, counting your grams of protein and hitting your protein requirements that I referenced earlier. Calories are just a huge distraction. It fails long-term most of the time.
Yeah, I mean, obviously, I think they are important to a certain extent, but I think my argument against, the calorie thing has always been, well, there's certain foods that make you feel like crap more than others. Like if I go and eat, like a grilled piece of bison with some broccoli and sweet potato or something like that, I'm going to feel a lot better than if I ate the same amount of calories in like pizza. Even though they have the same amount of calories, I will still feel way better with the bison. And at least in my own experience, I tend to want to eat more unhealthy food after that. And that's not to shame people for eating unhealthy. And it's not to say, at least in my opinion, that you can't have like wiggle room. But if your goal is like fat loss and you want to stay on a plan, like you got to be really, really careful with how you choose to eat certain foods. I look at like somebody like myself, and I know you've done this too, who has lost a bunch of weight. And sometimes it can be really overwhelming to say, okay, I need to lose all this weight and I got to do all this stuff. What is your advice to somebody who is in the midst of wanting to make a change like we're talking about, but having trouble taking that first step?
You have to believe that you can do it. And a lot of people choose the opposite approach, Doug, where I'll believe it when I see it. But in reality, it's you believe it, then you see it. Right. So I know this. My premise is that the human body is incredible. God built it to be self-healing. As long as we remove the interference, the body will heal itself. The inner physician, this innate intelligence, will go to work to heal the body. Have the faith that it will do that for you. And I know you might have those watching and listening, maybe you've been struggling with weight and yo-yo weight loss for 20, 30, 50 years. I can tell you that I've worked with all walks of life, men and women, all different ages, up to 88 years old, and they all make progress when they follow these golden rules of fat loss. This is just human physiology, biochemistry. It works, and it works really well. So if you're having a challenge, like you just said, Doug, with there's 5 rules, there's so many things that you need to piece together. Start with the first thing. The first thing right there is lowering insulin. Start with eating more protein, more fat, less carbs, and do that for as long as you feel comfortable doing. And then once you've mastered that and built some momentum up, you're going to notice that you lost some weight, by the way, and you have more energy levels just doing that first step. Then pair it with the second step. Then master that and pair it with the third step. One of the things I teach my students is, look, one tweak a week. These small little tweaks lead to giant peaks. There's that mindset that you go big or go home. And there's some people that want to do a lot all at once and they are successful that way. And that's great if that's you. Then there's some people that need to take it one step at a time, make some progress, make these behavioral changes, reprogram their subconscious mind and master that one thing before they move on to the next one. And that's totally fine too. So you know yourself better than I do. So for those watching and listening, if you feel like that is you, the latter person, where you need to do it one step at a time, you feel overwhelmed here, then just master that first step with lowering your insulin and then make some progress and then go to the second step.
What are some other like small tweaks that you've seen in your own personal journey? I know we're going to dive into your story in a little bit, because I know the audience is going to want to know like why you're so passionate about what you do. What have been some other small tweaks you've made over the last, say, few years that have really taken your health to the next level?
Well, the self-image is huge. And I have a brand new book coming out in June 2025 called Metabolic Freedom. And in that book, there's an entire chapter. It's my favorite chapter in the book, chapter 10, on how your thoughts influence your metabolism, influence fat loss and longevity and anti-aging. And I really believe that your thoughts are very powerful. And there's a self-image that you have of yourself. Like for me, Doug, and I know you have a similar story of weight loss and addiction. My self-image of myself was an obese guy. I was an obese guy, and I'll talk about my story later, but that was my self-image. So as I started to lose weight, I started to sabotage myself to go back to the old self-image that I had of myself, was that you're the obese guy. You can't be fit, right? So it wasn't until I changed that self-image that I was actually able to make sustainable progress. And that's a big thing with weight loss, by the way. And I talk about this in the book. This is all related to something called psycho-cybernetics. This is a book from the 1960s from a guy named Maxwell Maltz. And he defined this perfectly. Psycho-cybernetics is exactly what this analogy right here. It is an airplane, for example, that takes off from, let's say, Miami, which I live in the city of Miami, let's say to Los Angeles. When a plane takes off, the pilot sets the automatic pilot on that airplane. So it goes off course and then it course corrects and it keeps doing that until it gets to its destination. That's the psycho-cybernetics there. We do the same thing when we try to lose weight. The person says, I need to lose 10 pounds in the next 30 days. So they go on a diet and they start making some progress. They start eating clean. Maybe they start following these steps that we outlined here on the podcast. And then they course correct themselves back to eating unhealthy food, sabotaging themselves to get back to their old self-image, because their self-image is that of a person who's overweight. So once we correct that and we actually change the self-image, and this is what I did, I changed my self-image of a person that is healthy, that is fit, that is lean, then I made sustainable progress. And the best way to do that is with, this might sound woo-woo to some people, but it's with affirming that new self-image. Like for me, for those watching on YouTube, I have this goal card and I'm holding this up. It's a goal card that literally says, I'm so happy and grateful now that, and it has that self-image affirmation. So in the book, I talk about this goal card and I give an affirmation, and the affirmation is, I'm so happy and grateful now that I am at my perfect weight. I'm healthy. I'm fit. I have achieved perfect health. Right? As you repeat that over and over and over, you actually reprogram your mind to develop that new self-image. Your thoughts are really powerful. You have 60,000 thoughts every single day. And the psychiatrists have studied this, and they have determined that 90% of those thoughts are the same thoughts from yesterday, and 85% of those thoughts are negative thoughts, what Zig Ziglar used to call stinking thinking. And I always say, if your thinking is stinking, your dreams are shrinking. And Dr. Bruce Lipton has proven that your thoughts are a frequency that have the ability to communicate with your cells, with your DNA nucleus. And if it's a negative thought, let's say it's a thought of, I'm so unhealthy, I'm ugly, I'm unhappy, I'm unsuccessful, it's a hateful, resentful thought, that signal sent to your DNA signals to the DNA to produce inflammatory proteins. But if that thought is a loving thought, an abundant thought, a grateful thought, same signal sent, now the DNA is producing anti-inflammatory proteins. It's protecting your telomeres, protecting your DNA. So if we have 60,000 thoughts a day, that means I believe the greatest biohack that I could ever share with your audience is that you have 60,000 opportunities to put your body in a healing, anti-inflammatory state every single day.
Wow, man. I love that. I love how you brought that up, because I definitely struggle with it. I can relate to that a lot, to the point where, for years I still saw like the overweight drug addict Doug in the mirror, and like transforming that was one of the hardest things I ever had to do, but it was also one of the most fruitful things that I've ever done, because it really helped, transcend my self-image and the way I treat myself, the way I talk to myself, and even in the way that I show up every day in my life. So I'm so glad that you brought that up. What about for people that are listening to this that have like lower abdomen body fat, like the stubborn fat that can be hard to get rid of? They've tried everything. They've tried counting calories. They've tried upping their protein. They've tried lowering carbs. They've done all the things. What have been some of the secret hacks that you've used for yourself, and even the people that you've coached and in people in your community, to help get rid of the body fat that's stubborn?
Yeah, it's a great question. This stubborn fat that you're talking about, Doug, is this visceral fat that's around our stomach and our organs. And it's a very dangerous type of fat that applies pressure to our organs and creates chronic disease and, of course, obesity and weight gain and the unwanted stubborn fat we see around our stomach. It leads to fatty liver disease, diabetes, cancer, heart disease. So this is a type of fat we do want to burn. The good news is that it's very easy to burn this fat. It was once thought that you could not target belly fat. You just need to lose weight overall, and then over time, you'll start to lose the belly fat. But that's actually not true. You could actually target, eviscerate, melt that visceral fat pretty quickly. One of the things that I've used with my students and on myself is sprinting. Sprinting is a tremendous way to burn belly fat. And it doesn't have to be as crazy as you think when I say sprints. All it needs to be, here's the protocol, a 30-second all-out sprint, like a lion or tiger, somebody's chasing you, you're running for your life for 30 seconds, and then a 90-second rest, 3 rounds. 30-second all-out sprint, 90-second rest, 3 rounds. You do that 3 times a week. That's it. You're going to burn belly fat. The second way to burn belly fat is with green tea. And if you had green tea before the sprinting on an empty stomach, you're going to create even more results here. And the reason I bring up green tea, because numerous studies show that green tea contain catechins. These are these anti-inflammatory, antioxidant polyphenols that actually could burn visceral fat. In other words, belly fat. So you might want to have the green tea right before you go and you do your sprints. That's going to get you a big bang for your buck right there. The third thing that contributes to belly fat, visceral fat, is alcohol. So removing alcohol completely or reducing it substantially will help you target belly fat. Look, alcohol, I don't drink alcohol. I haven't had alcohol. It's going to be 10 years in a few months. And in 2 months, I'll be 10 years alcohol free. Every sip of alcohol will kill brain cells in your body. Every sip of alcohol will confuse, or I should say, occupy the liver and the metabolism to deal with that toxin you just ingested, which is the alcohol. That means every time you drink alcohol, you're not burning fat. You're not detoxifying. You are dealing with that toxin you just drank. So if you want to burn fat and feel good and live long, you want to eliminate alcohol. And I will say this, there are worse offenders out there when it comes to alcohol, and there are better options. The worst offenders in terms of alcohol are beer and wine. Beer is very estrogenic. That's not good for men. That's not good for women. When you have higher levels of estrogen from beer, it lowers testosterone, which is a very important fat-burning hormone for belly fat. It also could lead to man boobs in men or estrogen dominance in women. And it increases your sex hormone binding globulin, which is a hormone that absorbs available free testosterone. Not good. And wine, because the average wine in the United States is loaded with glyphosate, pesticides, herbicides. I remember when I was interviewing Dr. Zach Bush on my Metabolic Freedom podcast, he said the average California wine has 64 different herbicides and pesticides in it. That is inflammatory. That creates leaky gut. It creates weight gain. So if you're going to do wine, get organic, biodynamic wine, get a European organic wine. And then if you're going to do alcohol in general, the clear alcohols seem to be not as bad as the ones I mentioned. So clear alcohol meaning like vodka, tequila, whiskey. These are going to be clear alcohols that actually are not as bad, I should say. I shouldn't say better, but not as bad for you. One more thing here when it comes to burning the belly fat, stress. When you could master your stress levels, you're going to burn belly fat. When you have high levels of stress, high levels of cortisol, that belly fat is a cortisol belly. A lot of people that are stressed out, and keep in mind, there are 3 areas of stress: mental, emotional, number 1, physical, number 2, and then chemical, which is environmental toxins, number 3. When your stress bucket is full, when you have high levels of cortisol, you're storing fat, you're packing on fat. That's the cortisol belly. So sleep is important for that. Doing what you love in life, finding healthy hobbies is important for that. Turning off the television, not watching the news is important for that. Having an environment of supportive friends is important for that. So mastering your stress levels will also help you burn belly fat.
Yeah, I mean, you brought up so many good points there. And I think that one of the most challenging things for people is they're listening to conversations like this and they're like, okay, like I'm going to cut out alcohol. I'm going to do the sprinting. I'm going to sip on the green tea. But what types of foods like should I include? I mean, you've talked about like eliminating the processed foods and lowering your carb intake below 100 grams and upping your protein. What are your favorite foods to eat like for fat loss? Like give me like a specific breakdown as you can. What should the average day look like?
Yeah, I'll give you my favorite fat loss foods. Eggs with the yolk, by the way. There are so many benefits to quality eggs with the yolk. Eggs contain a lot of antioxidants, astaxanthin, lutein. Eggs also contain choline. Choline is such an important nutrient for the liver. And your liver does have a direct impact on fat loss, detoxification, and also breaking down dietary fat as well. Choline is one of the most important nutrients that support liver health. And unfortunately, most people that are overweight have fatty liver. When you have visceral fat, you have fat around your liver. And choline is one of the best things you can do to allow your liver to heal itself. So eggs are going to be important. And I do recommend when you cook your eggs, not to overcook your eggs. Overly scrambling them or even like hard boil when it's boiling too much. When you overly cook the eggs, it does oxidize the fats and then it's not going to be as beneficial. You lose some of the nutrients. So poaching your eggs are better. Soft boiled eggs are better. Soft scrambled is better. So make sure you lightly cook your eggs. The next food is going to be avocados. Avocados are technically a fruit, but they're loaded with amazing nutrients. Talking about stress, avocados contain a good amount of phytosterols, which support your adrenal glands, which support your stress levels. It's great for inflammation and for fat loss. Avocados contain 2 times the amount of potassium than bananas do without that insulin spike you'll get from bananas. And potassium is just important for blood pressure regulation and overall electrolyte balance. So avocados are great. I would definitely incorporate some avocados into the mix. Eggs with avocados are my favorite. The next food would be small fatty fish. So what do I mean by that? The reason why I say small fatty fish is because the bigger the fish, the more toxins that fish has. So think of tuna fish, think of dolphin if people eat dolphins, but think of swordfish. These are bigger fishes that accumulate a lot of toxins, and that's not good for you. Small fatty fish don't have as many toxins. So mackerel, sardines, anchovies, these are going to be much better for you. Salmon, wild-caught salmon, these contain really important anti-inflammatory omega-3 fats, which balance out the ratio of omega-6 to omega-3 fats. And a lot of people that have extra weight, a lot of people that are inflamed, have a high amount of omega-6 fats to omega-3 fats. They have about a 20-to-1 ratio of 20 omega-6, 1 omega-3. So with eating small fatty fish, that's going to be a lot healthier with that balance. So small fatty fish, and I recommend wild-caught fatty fish, wild-caught salmon versus farmed. It's going to be far healthier for you. The next food for fat loss is red meat. I love red meat. Doug, we had steak here in Miami together. We ate some good red meat. I primarily eat a carnivore sort of diet where probably 90% of my diet is red meat and eggs. It's animal based. And then 10% I'll have some other stuff. Red meat is complete in terms of the amino acids that are so important that we spoke about. Red meat is anti-inflammatory. Red meat contains a ton of minerals and vitamins. These are important for your metabolism to burn fat, for your cells to produce energy, so you have energy, so you feel good. Red meat is great for the gut microbiome. It's great for the brain. Red meat has been vilified over the years, but red meat is, to me, a superfood. So grass-fed beef, grass-fed lamb, even if it's not grass-fed, it's still going to be great for you versus processed junk food out there. So that would be my list of fat-burning foods. That's what I typically eat on a weekly basis that helps me stay lean.
One of the things you're known for is being very against seed oils. What do you say to your critics who would say the dangers of seed oils are not as bad for you as they may seem? What's your message to them?
Yeah, well, not all seed oils are bad for you. I would agree with them. It's hard to relay the message on like social media clips, right? When I talk about seed oils, it could get blown out of proportion. It's not that all seed oils are bad for you. So when people share studies with me showing, but these seed oils show like it actually helped with people's health outcomes. Yeah, they're correct. Seed oils, high quality omega-6 fats are actually really important for your cells and for lowering inflammation and burning fat. But 90% plus of the seed oils out there are not those seed oils. They're processed seed oils. Those are bad for you. Most of the seed oils out there are processed seed oils. Those are so inflammatory. Arguably, those are more inflammatory and will cause disease and weight gain faster than processed sugar and smoking cigarettes. And I say this not because I'm just making things up. When I interviewed Dr. Kate Shanahan, who's a medical doctor, she was Kobe Bryant's nutritionist for the Los Angeles Lakers when Kobe Bryant used to play. I asked her that question. I said, Dr. Kate Shanahan, out of 3 scenarios, eating processed sugar every day, smoking cigarettes every day, or eating these vegetable oils, seed oils every day, which one is going to lead to disease faster? And she said, that's easy. It's hands down the vegetable oils, the seed oils. Because these processed seed oils, when we just think about how they're made, it is a disgusting industrialized process. They take these seed oils, which are called polyunsaturated fatty acids. That's the chemical structure. We have saturated fats, like the ones I mentioned, grass-fed beef, eggs. These are great saturated fats. We have monounsaturated fats, which are avocados, avocado oil, olive oil. Then we have polyunsaturated fats. The reason polyunsaturated fats are so bad for you is because the chemical structure of them makes them very unstable. The word poly means many. So these fats have many of these little double bonds in the chemical structure that are closely located to other double bonds. What does that mean? That means the more double bonds a fat has, the more susceptible it is to go rancid, to go bad when it's introduced to heat and to oxygen. All right. So how do they process them? Heat and oxygen. They turn maybe a quality fat into a really inflammatory, unhealthy, unstable fat. And here's the thing. These bad fats, they stay in our bodies for years. The half-life is estimated to be 680 days, meaning if you stopped eating them today, 2 years later, about 680 days later, half of them will be in your body fat, creating inflammation. Dr. Martin Grutfeld had a study that published a couple years ago looking at the aldehydes produced from eating vegetable oils. Aldehydes are carcinogenic. They're cancer causing. Smoking cigarettes also produce aldehydes in the body. That's why smoking cigarettes is linked to cancer. And he showed in his study, looking at French fries that are fried in vegetable oils, seed oils, that a 5-ounce serving of French fries contain about 20 to 25 French fries. And it produces the same amount of aldehydes, these carcinogenic compounds, 20 to 25 tobacco cigarettes smoked. One French fry cooked in vegetable oil, if you eat that, it's like smoking a tobacco cigarette. Wow. So they're everywhere. They're in 80% of our food supply. They're at your fancy restaurants. And here's a list for your audience of the ones you want to avoid, these seed oils. We have canola oil, called rapeseed oil in the UK, corn oil, cottonseed oil, soybean oil, safflower oil, sunflower oil, grapeseed oil, and rice bran oil. These are the polyunsaturated fats that you want to make sure you're not getting in your food supply. Instead, you want the saturated fats like butter, ghee, beef tallow, duck fat, even the monounsaturated fats such as coconut oil, avocado oil. Even a saturated fat like coconut oil is terrific. These are more stable. They're anti-inflammatory. They help you burn fat. The seed oils will prevent you from burning fat. And by the way, I see this a lot. with people doing so many things right, and we do an audit on what they're eating, and they're eating a ton of seed oils. That inflammation is blocking their fat-burning hormones from getting into the cell. So once we remove the seed oils or limit the seed oils, they lower inflammation. They start to burn fat right away.
This episode is brought to you by Live On Labs. If you are someone who is constantly stressed, feeling depleted, and exhausted, I have some exciting news. My friends at Live On Labs have an incredible deal I can offer you. When you buy any product at full price, you get a free carton of their highly popular B-complex product, which I take every day. Taking a B-complex supplement can also help support things like a healthy metabolism, increased energy, blood sugar balance, and learning. Vitamin B supplements can help replenish nutrients depleted from stress. Live On Labs puts years of research into each product, which is why I stand behind them. Using liposome encapsulation technology, these products promote elite absorption so the supplements get into your cells and give you the best benefits that you're looking for. Right now, you can get a free carton of Lipospheric B Complex Plus, which is a $56 value with any full price purchase from liveonlabs.com. This supplement has the B vitamins and minerals that you need to help turn food into sustained natural energy throughout the day. Just add B Complex Plus and any other full price supplement to your cart and enter code BOPES24 at checkout to get this amazing deal. Now back to the show. I'm glad that you didn't include that in the first 5 things you brought up and not because it's not what you're saying isn't important. It's more because, and I think we may have talked about this at dinner, I think people will hear something like that, or they're like, even like some of the other biohacking stuff that's on the internet. And I love biohacking. I think it's great, but sometimes people step over dollars to pick up pennies and they're like, all right, I'm going to get in the sauna. I'm going to like cut out seed oils, but I'm not even exercising at all. I'm not even prioritizing sleep. I'm not even drinking enough water. And I just think sometimes people will assume like, yeah, if I do this, like it'll take care of everything else for me, instead of being like, no, like this is something to definitely pay attention to. It doesn't mean that you shouldn't incorporate like the basics. So I guess what I'm trying to kind of get at is like, what's your message to people that are skipping things like strength training and focusing on nutrition and sleep and just taking supplements and just trying to biohack their way into optimal health?
You'll make some progress, but then you'll be frustrated because you're skipping the fundamentals, right? Those first 5 golden rules I gave you for fat loss, those are fundamentals. You can't skip that. Now, if you do, you might make some progress. There's some great supplements and great biohacks out there that could get you in the right direction. And that's fine if you choose to go that route. But eventually, you're going to want to address those 5 golden rules and master that. And once you master that, and if you do that first, it makes everything else easier. The biohacks, the supplements, because I remember, Doug, when I was skipping the fundamentals and I was spending $500 a month on supplements, and I was wondering if they were even working because I was so inflamed from skipping the fundamentals that the supplements weren't even getting into my cells, and I was just essentially pissing it away in the urine, right? So it is important to follow those 5 first steps before you start adding the supplements. It's in the name. It's to supplement the actual work that you want to do.
I know we talked at the beginning about somebody who wants to lose like 50 plus pounds. We've talked about losing the stubborn body fat. Do your 5 golden rules, is it the same protocol for somebody who wants to lose a substantial amount of weight in just 30 days?
Yeah, that protocol will work for somebody who wants to lose as much weight as possible in a healthy way without destroying their metabolism in 30 days. That will work for men. It'll work for women. Now, outside of that, like once you're done with that 30-day protocol, then there needs to be more customization, right? Women would have a different approach than men. Women who have a menstrual cycle will have a different approach than postmenopausal women. And then men of different ages will have a different approach. But that 30-day protocol, those 5 golden rules, you do that for 30 days, yes, you're going to lose the most amount possible in those 30 days.
Let's get in depth about Ben Azadi. I mean, I know people see you now and you are like the epitome of health, talking about all the stuff that we're talking about on this podcast and some of the stuff you share on your YouTube. They look at you and they're like, oh, this guy, like he can't relate to what I'm going through because he must have always been healthy. He must have always had his health in tip top shape. But I know there's a story behind what you do. Who was Ben before the Ben of today?
Yeah, Doug, I was somebody who was depressed. I was physically obese and mentally obese. Growing up here, first generation American, right? My parents immigrated here from Iran, and I was born in Miami in 1984. Parents got divorced. My mom worked at Kentucky Fried Chicken when I was a kid, speaking of seed oils. So she would bring me home Kentucky Fried Chicken pretty much every night, and I would eat that. And I had bad behaviors as a kid, followed a standard American diet. So I was an obese kid. I struggled with a lot of self-esteem issues. I was the kid who would go to, let's say, like the beach or a swimming pool or an outdoor event, and I would never take my shirt off. God forbid. I would be too terrified to do that. I would wear a shirt inside of the ocean. I was bullied. I was picked on. In high school, I got into drugs, marijuana, and other drugs. I started drinking alcohol in high school, developed addictions to video games, extreme addictions to video games, and barely got out of high school, graduated late. As an adult in college, eventually dropping out of college because I couldn't even focus, I found myself in 2007, 23-year-old young man. I weighed 250 pounds, physically obese with 34% body fat, mentally obese, looking on the internet for ways to end my life because I was depressed and suicidal and I just wanted to give up, and I was tired of being in pain. I was pre-diabetic. I had brain fog. My whole body felt like it was on fire from inflammation. I remember if I went to the mall, the shopping mall, my knees were so inflamed that I would have to wear a knee brace if I was going to walk for more than 30 minutes. I was 23 years old dealing with all this. I would pull my back every other week, and I wanted to give up. And I did explore giving up on my life and taking my life, but I kept thinking about my mother. I kept thinking about the devastation that she would have to deal with if I took my life. And I didn't want to do that to her. She was and is my superhero. I love her so much. And that's the only thing that stopped me, right? So at that point, I knew I had to figure things out. I was rock bottom and I was lost in life. I was broken. Then I started to get into the work of Dr. Wayne Dyer and Bob Proctor. And I actually started to get into more of the mindset part before I changed anything. I remember studying Dr. Wayne Dyer, and he would say things like, look, if you keep blaming other people for your problems, you're going to have to hire a psychiatrist for the rest of the world in order for you to get better. And I'm like, damn, that stung, and it's so true. And he would say things like, hey, when you squeeze an orange, what comes out? Orange juice. Why is that? Because that's what's inside. Well, when life squeezes you and applies pressure, what comes out is what's inside, your thoughts, your feelings, your actions. And what was coming out of me was hate, resentment, depression. So I knew if I changed what was inside of me, my thoughts, my feelings, and actions, then what would come out would be something else. And I took responsibility. I think a lot of people don't really understand that word, but responsibility is your ability to respond to life. When your ability to respond to life is poor, you're going to get poor results. When your ability to respond to life is better, you're going to get better results. So in that second, Doug, I stopped being the victim of my history. I started to become the victor of my destiny, and I started to move my body. I started to eat real food, and I went through this incredible transformation. You mentioned that I lost 50 pounds in 9 months. It was actually 80 pounds in 9 months. I went from 250 pounds to 170 pounds, 34% body fat to as low as 6% body fat, a size 38, 40 waist to size 30. And I completely transformed my physical appearance. And to your point, that was about 17 years ago. People see me now and they think that I've always been a lean, healthy guy. I'm not. And I've done my genetic test, by the way, and I hope this empowers your audience. My genetics in terms of fat loss are terrible. I am not good at burning fat. My genetics show that. I am susceptible to insulin resistance and type 2 diabetes, which my dad had. I am susceptible to obesity. Yet, you look at me, I'm lean, I'm fit, I'm healthy, because it's not about your genes. Your genes do not determine your destiny. They are just clues. Your decisions determine your destiny, right? So I overrode all of that. I was able to utilize epigenetics, right? And I've kept the weight off for 17 years, right? There's people that lose a whole bunch of weight and gain it back. That's not me, because the focus is on metabolic health. So yeah, I can relate to a lot of people out there that are obese, overweight, lost in life. They're trying so many different things. I've been there myself, and I could tell you that rock bottom is a beautiful place, because there's another direction that has a lot of potential, and that's where we want to get you to.
You mentioned your mom being your inspiration, essentially, for changing your life and doing what you're doing now. I mean, that was like what got the fire kind of started outside of you wanting to feel a different way. You mentioned that she worked at KFC, which is super ironic because, a place that's loaded with seed oils. How has what you've done with yourself, how has that impacted your mom? Like, meaning, has she made any improvements to her health? What's your relationship like with her now?
Yeah, I have a fantastic relationship with my mom. I'm a mama's boy for sure. I talk to my mom every day. I see her every Thursday. Me and my fiance have dinner with her. And yeah, she has the biggest heart. She's the most unselfish person I've ever met in my life. She sacrificed so much for me when I was a kid. I mean, I was a bad kid. I know you were a bad kid too, Doug. And my mom stuck by my side no matter how awful I was to her and how just awful I was to myself. And I'm so grateful for that. All right. So it's been difficult over the years to get her to adopt some of these holistic health tips that I follow. However, over the years, she has. She takes some of the supplements I take. If I go to her apartment, I'll ask her, did you take your supplements today? And she'll be taking some of the supplements. She legit in her coffee. She takes her magnesium. She wears these LifeWave patches that I have on. I'm always talking about her sleep and she tracks her sleep. So slowly but surely she's come along. It could be challenging to inspire or convince a family member to get on board because they just have seen you when you were a kid. And it's hard to inspire somebody who knows you since you were a kid. But thankfully, over the years, she has been able to adopt some of the practices.
That's awesome, man. I think it's really cool that you have that special relationship with your mom. I mean, I think it's just something I'm sure she really appreciates too, is just like seeing her son, who was completely miserable, mentally and physically broken, like you said, just completely transform his life. I think it's really awesome.
Thank you, Doug.
I know you're big on gratitude as well. Like you have a shirt that says gratitude, like you talk about how grateful you are all the time for things in your life. We've spent most of the conversation like talking about like the meat and potatoes of fat loss and losing stubborn body fat and all these things. But as we've also talked about, and as you've shared, like having a healthy mindset is also super important. Like, why is gratitude so important to you?
Gratitude is, like I mentioned, sleep being the Swiss Army knife of health. Gratitude is also the Swiss Army knife of health. Gratitude, what I call vitamin G, it just, man, first of all, gratitude is an emotional exercise, not an intellectual exercise. It's not a checklist. It's something you feel. When your body is in a state of gratitude, so many incredible processes happen in a millisecond. We know that there are studies out there like Dr. Joe Dispenza has done these workshops where he had people get into this elevated, emotional, grateful state. And he's measured their blood levels, their cortisol levels before and after, their immune system, their IgA levels for their immune system before and after. And he saw, well, just by practicing gratitude, there's a decrease in cortisol, the stress hormone, an increase in the secretory IgA, which is going to build your immune system. So you could do that in a second. People that are grateful live longer. There are studies that show that. It extends your lifespan. It increases your quality of relationships. People who practice gratitude have lower levels of blood pressure, levels of blood sugar levels. Gratitude is where it's at. This is a universal law. What you feed energy to expands. So the more things you have gratitude for, the more things you'll have gratitude for. And there's a part of the brain, if you want the science of this, if there's somebody, because, left brainers, Doug, have a challenge with the vitamin G thing. Left brainers are really analytical, and I could be a left brainer sometimes, but they need to see the facts, the figures, give me the studies, give me the numbers. Left brainers are like lawyers, scientists, they're engineers. So let's talk about the science of what gratitude does to rewire your brain. There's a part of your brain that's the size of your pinky in your brainstem called the reticular activating system. All right, God put it there, or love, the universe, whatever phrase you want to use, but it's in your brain. It was put there for a purpose. That purpose is to be a selective seeking mechanism, meaning we have millions of things that are stimulating the brain every single day. If we didn't have a filter in place, the brain would short circuit. We would not be able to focus. So this RAS, the reticular activation system, filters out. We have trained it and programmed it to filter out what's not important and to only see what is important. Okay, so how does this work with gratitude? Let me give you an analogy. I'm about to buy a car, and I've been looking for the last 4 years. I've been wanting this car. So I've been on autotrader.com and all these dealership websites, and I've been looking at this car. And let me give an example. Let's say it's an Audi. Let's say it's a red Audi. And I'm putting a lot of energy into this red Audi, right? Let's say when I buy this car, this red Audi, we'll say this red Audi RS Q8. I buy the car. I drive it off of the dealership, and I notice something. There are red Audi RS Q8s everywhere I go. Like at the stop sign, there's another red Audi there. at the shopping center. There's a red Audi parked there on the highway. I see red Audis. Now, why are they all showing up now? Or is it because I bought a red Audi? Now everybody wants a red Audi? No, they were always there, but I've trained my RAS to now see it because I put so much energy into researching this red Audi, right? Same thing with gratitude. When you start to practice vitamin G and get into that emotional state, now things that you used to just ignore or be bitter about or have resentment about, you're now grateful for. You've retrained the RAS. Now you see more things to be grateful for. You find little things like, I'm grateful for this Sony camera that I have here where I'm able to communicate with Doug. Doug is in Maryland. I'm in Miami. Like, what a cool technology. We could have this conversation and change lives, right? You start to be grateful for everything. And the cool thing is that the more you have gratitude for things, the more things you have to be grateful for is what I'm trying to say, right? So it retrains that reticular activation system. So Doug, that was a long answer, but I love vitamin G. I think we should all get it every single day. There's no upper limit. It's anti-inflammatory and you notice it right away.
Yeah, and I think it's important for people's weight loss transformations too, or any other transformation that they're making in life. Because I think that, one of the things I've said for years is you should focus on how far you've come and not how far you have to go, because it's easy to be like, I haven't lost, the 40 pounds more I want, or it's easy that I haven't hit that PR in the gym, or it's easy that I haven't, fill in the blank. But the hard thing is being like, oh, like I have accomplished these things. I mean, one of the quote unquote hacks that I used to use when I was full-time personal training with my clients, when the scale wouldn't move, because sometimes the scale just doesn't move. If the goal was weight loss, I would get them to focus on, okay, you've gone from somebody who hasn't been in the gym for 10 years. Now you're hitting the gym 2 to 3 days a week. Let's focus on that. Or you're somebody that talked about how you had difficult relationships with your family. Now that you feel better about yourself, your relationships with your family have improved. Or you're somebody that talked about eating fast food every single day of the week. Now you're only eating fast food twice a week. And so when I got them to focus on things like that, their mood and their perception completely shifted, because they're like, oh, I'm not as far behind as I think. I had a client probably about a year and a half ago who this very thing, ate fast food every single day, drank soda every single day. And I knew, okay, this person has crushed her system for years. Asking her to cut out everything is going to have her fall flat on her face, just unrealistic at the start. So gradually I started having her reduce the amount of time she ate processed food and fast food. And it began to shift things for her, because a few months went by and she called me and she said, I just ate McDonald's. I'm so pissed at myself. And I'm like, well, how many meals a week do you eat? And she's, I don't know, around 21. And I'm like, how many fast food meals did you eat this week? She's like, 2. I'm like, so 19 of your meals were healthy, right? She was like, yeah. And it got her to see it differently, that it's like, oh, like I'm grateful for the progress that I've made. So I know that was my long-winded answer of kind of reflecting on what you just said while also piggybacking it to bring it full circle with what we discussed here. And it's all well and good to have these massive goals, but you have to celebrate your success. And I think that's one of the ultimate hacks as well.
I love it, Doug. So true. Focusing on the gain versus the gap. That's what it is, right? And that little perspective shift that you did for your client, it's huge. And that's why having a coach is so important, or somebody to help you see that perspective shift. It's not about perfection. It's about progress. It's about beating who you were yesterday, just having better habits than you had yesterday, better thoughts than you had yesterday. I always tell my students, because they also have that challenge where they'll have a setback and they'll focus on that setback and let that setback turn into a week's worth of setbacks and then a month's worth of setbacks. And I always tell them, look, it's not about the setback. It's about the get back. Let's celebrate the progress you've made, like you just said, Doug. And let's figure out what can we do to get back, right? So right on, I'm with you on that.
Anything else you'd like to add that you think people should really pay attention to when it comes to their weight loss or fat loss transformation?
Yeah, your environment is arguably pinnacle here, because I talked about your thoughts and how your thoughts influence your behaviors. Your environment determine your thoughts and your belief system and your self-image. That then determines the steps that you take, your actions, your habits, etc., which then determines your results and then essentially your destiny, right? So it's environment, thoughts, habits, results, destiny. And you could take these steps, I should say, but if your environment is telling you, what are you doing? You're practicing fasting. That's going to destroy your metabolism. You're eating red meat. Don't you know all that cholesterol is going to make your heart explode? Gratitude. Come on. That's stupid, right? If you have your environment pulling you back to the old ways, it's very difficult to make lasting changes. And our environment programs our subconscious mind and determines everything we do. In the book Metabolic Freedom, I have an exercise where I have everybody who reads the book or listens to it do an exercise where they do an audit on their environment, and they list their top 10, 20 friends or people in their life, and they put them into two different categories. The category on the left are the drainers, people that complain, they gossip, they're not on board with your healthy changes, they drag you down, you feel exhausted after you speak to them. Then you have the chargers, people that are rooting for you, they want you to be successful, they're hoping that you make these changes and live a healthier life. You do an audit and you get clear on those people in your life and your environment, and you intentionally spend more time with the chargers, less time with the drainers. That is so important to make everlasting change here. Change your environment, and it's going to make everything else that you do so much easier for you.
Ben Azadi, this has been incredible. Thank you so much for your time. I think the audience is going to love this episode.
Thank you, Doug. I appreciate you, my friend.
Thank you so much for watching. If you like this video, I really think you're going to like this video as well. I'll see you there.